Welcome, everyone, to this briefing brought to you by the Israel Defense and Security Forum, IDSF, in Hebrew name is Bitonistim. IDSF is a leading Israeli organization advocating for strong national security to defend Israel. It's a great pleasure to have an expert today on the briefing, Jennifer Teale. Jennifer, it's great to see you. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you for having me. Thank you. It's great to
And,
be here.
wonderful, wonderful. It's great to see you. And our viewers have been asking for quite some time to do a briefing where we do a deep dive into Russia, into the involvement of China, and how these countries are influencing what is happening here in the Middle East, the relationship with Iran, and how it's affecting this war in Israel. So, Jennifer, you're located up in Georgia right now. You have Russia on your northern border. So it's great to have you here as an expert, a geopolitical analyst. You write a lot for IDSF Research Department. I'm going to share in the Zoom link a recent article you wrote about China and their relationship with Iranian oil. So you have a lot to share, a lot of knowledge. I'm going to jump in and ask you a really tough question to begin with, and would love to hear what you have to say. How do Russia and China justify their support for Iran's military advancements? And what are the broader implications for this and for the balance of power and stability in the Middle East?
So, Russia and China's support for Iran's military ambitions is framed as a means to counter US influence and solidify their own strategic footholds in the region. However, their justifications mask a more dangerous game of power projection. For Russia, Iran is an essential ally in its broader strategy to challenge Western dominance and secure stability in the region that aligns with Moscow's ambitions. This support isn't just a diplomatic maneuver, it's part of a deliberate strategy to undermine US influence in the Middle East. Russia's engagement in Iran's missile program not only strengthens this alliance, but also enhances its leverage in negotiations with the West, raising the stakes of any future confrontation. China, while less militarily involved, adopts an equally problematic approach by supplying critical chemicals for Iran's missile program. China ensures continued access to Iranian resources, energy resources, further entrenching its economic footprint in the region. This economic strategy is part of a broader effort to balance US power without direct military involvement. It's a subtle yet insidious form of geopolitical maneuvering that seeks to reshape the Middle East power dynamics without the visible costs of military engagement. The broader implications of these actions are deeply destabilizing. Iran's missile program accelerates the arms race in the region, raising the potential for escalation as countries like Israel and Saudi Arabia respond by strengthening their own defense capabilities. The Middle East's already fragile balance of power is on the edge of greater instability. Russia and China's increasing involvement not only emboldens Iran, but also undermines global efforts to curb its military ambitions. In effect, Russia and China are deepening the region's volatility while undermining the West's influence and creating a more precarious environment.
Okay, so let me ask you, do Russia and China care about the regional stability? Because if they destabilize the entire Middle East, doesn't that impact their broader global priorities?
So, do they care? They both claim to prioritize regional stability, but their strategies are diverging significantly because of their priorities. Um, Russia views stability through the lens of its own concerns, primarily focused on extremist threats, securing energy routes, um, but it is a narrow, self-interested approach, and it's disregarding the long-term stability of the region. But China is frames this stability as essential to its economic growth. It enables China to secure critical resources while expanding its influence through soft power and leveraging trade agreements and infrastructure projects. China is seeking to create a dependency on its technology and investments rather than involving itself in the military complexities of the region.
Okay, and then just in terms of really understanding the interests of Russia and China in the Middle East, how does it relate to their challenge of U.S. hegemony? Meaning, rather than directly take on the U.S., so to speak, focus on the Middle East as a means of overpowering the U.S. How does that work?
Well, absolutely. So the Middle East is a crucial battleground for both Russia and China in their efforts to challenge US hegemony. Russia is more direct, leveraging its power, its strategic alliances with Iran, with Syria, through military engagement in Syria and its overt support. Russia is openly countering US influence, but this isn't just about securing allies. It's a calculated strategy to weaken the US position and expand Russia's role as a dominant regional power. But China, on the other hand, plays a more subtle yet equally impactful role while avoiding direct military conflict. As I said, China is using its economic leverage as a tool to erode US influence. Through initiatives like the Belt and Road Initiative, China is inserting itself into regional infrastructure projects, trade routes, energy supply chains, and this economic expansion is reshaping the Middle East landscape, providing countries with an alternative to Western-led institutions. By offering infrastructure development and financial support, China positions itself as a viable alternative now to US dominance, particularly in places like the UAE, where Chinese investments are growing rapidly. And both countries are using the Middle East as a strategic proving ground to challenge US dominance, but their methods reflect their broader global strategies. Russia through direct military involvement and China through economic subversion.
So obviously here in Israel, we want to see a de-escalation in conflict and war, and certainly the U.S. Has made their position clear to end wars, but at the same time, an escalation in conflict is potentially in the best interest of Russia and China if they're trying to use this as a leverage point to challenge the U.S. Are you able to comment on that variation in terms of their interests?
Well, yeah, I suppose escalating conflicts in the region present both challenges and opportunities for China and Russia as they continue to challenge US influence. For Russia, instability is often viewed as an opportunity to project power and present itself as a stabilizing force. In Syria, for instance, Russia's military involvement not only strengthens its foothold in the region, but it also allows it to expand its influence as a key power broker in the Middle East, positioning itself as an alternative, as I said, similar to China. But China, meanwhile, avoiding military engagement, instead capitalizing on regional instability by offering economic aid and development projects in Lebanon. For example, China's involvement in post-Beirut reconstruction highlights its growing presence as a viable alternative to Western-led reconstruction efforts. While China's approach is non-combative, it is strategically aimed at creating long-term dependencies, making countries in the region reliant more so on Chinese investments and technologies. And both countries see opportunities now to gain influence here. However, this increasing instability also risks complicating their broader aspirations. For Russia, direct military involvement could stretch further its resources and destabilize the region further, potentially drawing it into broader conflict that would challenge its domestic and global standing. For China, though, its reliance on regional economic partnerships makes it vulnerable to geopolitical fallout from escalating tensions. As both countries vie for influence, they are walking a delicate line, balancing regional instability with their long-term global strategies of challenging US hegemony.
I want to thank all of our viewers who are sending in really fascinating questions, whether you're watching right now on Zoom or for those who watch on YouTube and then click in the description and get their questions in. So Jennifer, let me ask you a question. You know, you've made it clear that Russia's approach is more military oriented and China is non-combative. They have more of an economic angle. But is there any indication that there would be or is an increasing military coordination directly between Russia and China in the Middle East?
Well, I suppose while there have been notable strides in global military cooperation between Russia and China, particularly in joint naval exercises, their actions in the Middle East remain largely independent. And this divergence is a critical point of tension. Russia's military presence in Syria and its support for regimes like Iran highlight its more assertive, interventionist approach, say, rooted in a desire to expand its influence and counter US power. Russia's military footprint is a key component of its strategy in the Middle East, and its willingness to engage directly in conflicts underpins its desire to reshape the region's security order. China, however, maintains a far more cautious stance. While it has expanded in its presence in the region economically and diplomatically, it has refrained from direct military involvement, as I said, preferring instead to maintain this low profile. And this is contrasting sharply with Russia's more direct and often confrontational posture. However, their growing cooperation in areas like arms deals and military alliances, as well as joint naval exercises, does signal a willingness to coordinate their strategic goals. These exercises, while symbolic, demonstrate that both countries recognize the Middle East as a critical arena in their broader geopolitical contest with the West. Despite these gestures of cooperation, Russia and China's military strategies in the Middle East remain fundamentally different. Russia's approach is direct and assertive, while China, is indirect and primarily economic. Their coordination is therefore more tactical than strategic, reflecting their respective roles in the region's evolving geopolitical landscape.
So we know that Russia has been very active in Syria. Do you see similar engagements by Russia or by China in other areas within the Middle East?
I think it's highly unrealistic to expect China to take on a military role akin to Russia's in the Middle East. While China has strategically expanded its economic presence, its long-standing non-interference policy and aversion to military entanglements in foreign conflicts remains deeply entrenched. And despite growing investments, particularly in Iran and Saudi Arabia, China's priorities lie in economic leverage and diplomatic engagement, not direct military confrontation. Any pressure to adopt a military role would signify a dramatic departure from its traditional stance, something that is unlikely unless provoked by extreme circumstances. Even as China's investments increase, it will likely pursue non-combat roles like peacekeeping or enhanced security cooperation, but such engagement will always be framed as economic protectionism rather than direct military intervention. China's growing footprint, particularly through initiatives like the Belt and Road, may push it into more assertive security roles, but any such moves would be focused on maintaining access to resources and protecting infrastructure rather than directly involving itself in the region's conflicts.
So then, other than Syria, are there other fronts that we could potentially see more Russian active activity?
Mm-hmm. For me, Russia's military engagements are highly calculated and tailored to serve its immediate strategic interests and not an overarching commitment to regional stability. While Russia's involvement in Syria is driven by its desire to secure a military presence and influence key energy routes, it does not mean Russia will automatically expand its military role across the region. In fact, its involvement in places like Libya, where it has supported Khalifa forces, show how opportunistic Russia's approach is. And if Russia perceives a conflict as an opportunity to challenge US dominance or secure its own regional interests, it will intervene. But such actions are always framed by Russia's limited objectives. Russia's military interventions are not about creating long-term peace or stability. They are about strategically positioning itself in the Middle East, and any future engagements will hinge on whether they align with its broader geopolitical goals. Russia's military role in the region is one of calculated optimism, and it's unlikely to spread beyond conflicts where it sees a clear and immediate advantage.
Thank you, Jennifer. Let's jump to another topic, if we can, of course, related, which is less on the military front and more on the diplomatic. We know, of course, that a lot of this war in Israel has been tied to Israel's normalization with Arab states such as the UAE, and then more recent, all the discussions with Saudi Arabia. Are you able to share a little bit about how Russia and China navigate their relationships with both sides of these emerging alliances?
Well, the normalization agreements, especially the Abraham Accords, pose a direct challenge to Russia's traditional balancing act in the Middle East. Historically, Russia has attempted to maintain cordial relations with both Israel and key Arab states like Syria and Iran, but these agreements complicate Russia's position. On one hand, it has made efforts to engage diplomatically with Israel, but its closer ties with Iran and Syria now put it at odds with are Arab states that are warming to Israel. Russia's attempts to act as a mediator are undermined by its allegiances to Iran and the regime in Syria that's now left, reducing its credibility as a neutral actor. In contrast, though, China's neutral stance enables it to navigate these relationships without the same diplomatic baggage. Its approach is defined by economic opportunism. China has built strong economic ties with both Israel and Arab states, using its vast infrastructure investments and trade deals to foster relationships without becoming embroiled in political or security issues. And China's commitment to neutrality allows itself to position itself as a crucial economic partner across the region, but it's also a calculated move that ensures Beijing avoids getting caught up in the region's volatile political landscape.
So if China's positioning itself neutral for economic purpose, what does that mean in terms of potentially acting as a mediator in conflicts here in Israel or the Middle East?
Mm-hmm. So Russia has made several overtures to mediate in the current conflict, but its close ties with Iran and Syria significantly undermine its credibility. While Russia has hosted leadership from the Palestinian authorities and advocated for a two-state solution, its strong alignment with Tehran, anathema to Israel's security concerns, prevents it from being viewed as a neutral or trustworthy mediator. Russia's political involvement in the conflict is driven by its own interests, particularly in countering US influence in the region. But this complicates its potential for genuine mediation. On the one hand, and on the other, China's involvement is far more detached. While it officially supports the Palestinian cause, China's focus remains primarily on economic engagement rather than political or security intervention. Its strategy is rooted in these trade relationships and infrastructure projects rather than seeking to play a significant role in the peace process. And China may occasionally express support for peace efforts, but its real influence is tied still to its economic partnerships across the region. Russia and China may both express interest in playing a diplomatic role, but their motivations and methods differ greatly. Russia is actively engaged in politics, while China remains focused on maintaining its neutrality and economic opportunities.
Okay, so Iran is fixated and focused on nuclear weapons. How do China and Russia, how do their strategies in the region relate to that primary interest of Iran?
Well, Russia and China's relationships with Iran are pivotal to their respective regional strategies, yet their approaches are markedly different. Russia's partnership with Iran has a clear strategic component. It seeks to counter US influence and maintain a foothold in the Middle East. However, Russia's continued support for Iran is a double-edged sword, as it must carefully manage Iran's nuclear ambitions. Russia is cautious about Iran's push for nuclear weapons, fearing it could destabilize the region and complicate its own involvement in the region and in Syria, especially. While Russia provides diplomatic cover for Iran, particularly regarding its nuclear rights, it is deeply wary of an outright nuclear arms race. Moscow's support for Iran is transactional. It serves to its broader strategic goals, but Russia remains mindful of the risks of escalation. China's relationship with Iran, though also centered around energy and economic interest, is similarly complex. China values Iran for its energy resources and its strategic location, which are critical for its own Belt and Road ambitions. However, China is far more cautious about Iran's nuclear program. While it has not publicly condemned Iran's nuclear pursuits, China prefers to handle the issue quietly through diplomacy rather than confrontation. For Beijing, maintaining stability in the region is paramount, as any destabilizing move could jeopardize its economic investments. Like Russia, China walks a fine line in its relationship with Iran, but its focus is on maintaining access to resources and protecting its economic interests rather than directly confronting Iran's nuclear ambitions.
Jennifer, I really appreciate your time and your expertise. We only have a few minutes left. So I want to ask you a hard question, really focused on long-term strategies and a kind of a future outlook. This is a tough one. In your opinion, which country, Russia or China, will exert a greater influence on the Middle East over the next 10 to 20 years? Big question, just a few minutes to answer it if you can.
Well, looking ahead, China is poised to exert greater influence in the Middle East over the next decade or so, primarily due to its economic power. The Belt and Road Initiative has already begun transforming regional infrastructure, and China's increasing investments in energy, technology, and manufacturing are making it an indispensable partner for many Middle Eastern countries. Over time, this economic leverage will translate into significant political influence, with China becoming a central player in the region's economic and security landscape, while Russia will remain a key military and political player. Its influence, though, is more limited by its economic vulnerabilities and dependence on unstable regional partners. Russia's military footprint, particularly in Syria, will continue to challenge Israel's security, but its ability to shape the region's future will be constrained by economic and internal pressures. In contrast, China's economic ascendancy provides it with a more sustainable foundation for influence, making it the dominant force in shaping the Middle East's trajectory. For Israel, this shift means greater strategic calculations regarding China's growing economic presence, while also navigating the complexities of Russia's continued military role.
Jennifer Teale, thank you so much for sharing all of that. Stay warm up in Georgia while you are there. Very much appreciate all of your contributions to the IDSF Research Department. Great speaking with you. I hope you will come back and share more of your expertise on these geopolitical issues with Russia and China.
Thanks for having me. Thanks a lot.
Absolutely. Thank you to all of our viewers and supporters for tuning in. We will be back with you tomorrow, 10 a.m. Eastern Time, 5 p.m. here in Israel. Until then, stay safe, stay strong. Take care, everyone.